Radio on with me. He's one of my favorite hosts on the network. I usually pick up his archive whenever I have time to do so. I'd say I've listened to about half his shows. I find him extremely well-educated, a rigorous researcher. He has a PhD in nutrition. He's studied with Linus Pauling, one of the greatest academics of this era. And he also expanded on Pauling's research and developed a very deep understanding of the 23 essential minerals that we need to maintain good human health. And out of that, he developed a company called Mother Earth Minerals, and he often lectures on the issue of these vital minerals. He's also an expert in water and has a patent-pending product that produces this negatively charged water. Are you with us, Dr. Truott?
I am here, Brian. Thanks for your patience with me. I had to rush from another meeting I had. Today's been one of those crazy days. You know, you start at actually 6 o'clock in the morning, and I've had planning meetings all day long. Just rushed in, broke away early, but I'm here. I am here, and that's the main thing. Thanks for your patience.
Well, I had another chap lined up to stand in for you for a few minutes, so I hope I didn't put too much pressure on you to be on time, but my buddy would have gone for half an hour, no problem. But I'm really glad you're here. I'm really looking forward to getting into some of your areas of research, and you've been on doing this research, and you've been on radio for how many years now? Over 20 years?
Oh golly, I've lost count, Brian. I really have. I started back in the early 90s, actually, with a health-based radio show as I was working towards getting my PhD. And again, keep in mind, for those listeners, my doctorate came out of Dresden, Germany, and I had no idea about what went on in the firestorm of Dresden, Germany in the latter months of WW2. I was blissfully ignorant about that, but one of the things that I was brought up to speed is that Dresden was in fact the homeopathic capital of the world, if you can say such a thing. Okay, it's really where nutrition and the role of putting the right kind of water, for heaven's sakes, a simple thing like water that's ultra purified, and mineral research really began. I had no idea. It was like, wow, it's a whole new world opened up to me about that, and so I really felt a desire, Brian, to share it with people, and so this is back before internet radio, of course, and so I paid for time for starting out with a half-hour show on KSUB radio in southern Utah, Cedar City. The show was successful in its genre, in what it was designed to do, to the point where a very, very close friend of mine, the editor of the daily newspaper there in local Cedar City, Utah, was frustrated. Frustrated because, you see, he had a lot of stories that he thought was extremely newsworthy, and so did I. I concurred with him completely. He would oftentimes go to great lengths to get the story ready for print, only at the 9th hour to be yanked by the publisher, the owner, and the owners of the paper as being incorrect or politically incorrect. And so he was very frustrated, to the point of one major series of stories involving the subject of satanic ritual abuse, for heaven's sakes, that he had paid money for private investigation files to check out stories. He wanted to do a series of up to 9 series of articles on the topic, and it was all shut down. Well, he was so incensed over it, he resigned his position with the newspaper, then came to me and said, we really should do a radio show, and I, with our contacts at KSUB Radio, my friend Warren and I approached the owners, manager of the station, worked out a time slot live on Thursday nights for 2 hours. It was actually Thursday afternoon, but rebroadcast numerous times throughout the rest of the week. Long story short is, we came up with the name, the story behind the story that's basically censored from mainstream news, and we took pride in our investigative journalism. We really did. We made sure we were just not out there fear-mongering, that we had our facts straight before we went on. And I got to tell you, for over a period of 4 years, we did a great job, I think, and it got recognized in our market to the point where we actually were nominated for Peabody Awards in our segment, and that's equivalent of an Oscar in the movie.
Yeah, that's an
business.
Investigative journalist honor.
Yeah, that's what we were doing. So if you look at the 90s, it's now 2012. Yeah, pretty close to. I'm sorry, 2015, going 2016. Pretty close to 30 years in the business. And I've seen a lot of stories, Brian, as you can tell. I've seen some and interviewed some incredible guests who are now deceased. But my goodness, I would have to look back over my radio career and tell you that probably one of the most interesting sources, and always a good interview, was a man named William Bill Cooper. I never got the pleasure of meeting him personally. I talked to him many times, both on and off the air. His background in Navy intelligence was well documented. Of course, a lot of people even today say he was a disinformer, a misinformation agent. But see, there you go. How do you know? Because the only way that whistleblowers can be discredited is to basically attack their character. And so there was, all I can tell you is Bill Cooper's information checked out always. There was never one thing he told me that we had on the air that wasn't absolutely factual. So I can say, he was an incredible resource. Even to the point, I remember of an interview we did live on radio in August of 2001, where I'm telling you, he nailed the events of September 11th incredibly well. Broke the story of the Project for New American Century, the planners wanting these regime changes, the Bush administration, etc., and what they planned to do for the expansion of what they called Greater Israel, right? The change of regime in Afghanistan, the Taliban had to go, yada yada. He laid this out in August. And he said the only way this is going to happen, Dr. Ott, is to have another Pearl Harbor event. Now, I'm playing the devil's advocate with him. I said, well, it's really hard to believe that individuals, U.S. citizens could make war on their own kind just for political and or monetary gain, right? He says, well, don't underestimate these people. They are absolutely dark, and 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 American lives to them is the equivalent of swatting a fly. So what can I say? When I saw the events unfold on September 11th, I was just, oh my heavens, he was right on. He told exactly the way it was. And
wow.
Bill Cooper was gunned down eventually, just a few months after those initial interviews, where he broke the news on September 11th. He was gunned down in his driveway by agents of the government. So he sealed his testimony with his life.
Where was that, Dr. Ott?
I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 2001. It was shortly after the events of 9/11. It might have been early 2002, but it was in that neck of area. I don't remember the exact date.
Yeah, no, that's ballpark's good.
Yeah,
that's a remarkable story. That's what I haven't actually heard that. I've heard maybe about 12 of your shows. I have a podcast site for my show, I'm Nature, and I've put a couple of your shows up there because I thought they were so meaningful and interesting and informative. And you like to just carry the ball quite often. You just do a show on your own, which I find really that's quite remarkable. And you carry it well all by yourself.
Well, thank you. It's called monologues. I did a lot of that as I carried on the story behind the story on live radio. And of course, I value input from listeners. We never would turn away a caller unless they were completely, off the chart with profanity and this type of thing. We'd pull the plug on that because we would make sure the screeners would make sure not to use foul language, this type of thing for obvious reasons, right? And so a lot of times callers that call in have some great things to add to the discussion. And yeah, monologues to me are good if you've done your homework and you pretty much know what you're talking about. Okay. So yeah, I appreciate that compliment. Thank you for that. But we try to do our best we can, the best we can.
No, I mean I've been studying these things now for probably as long as you have. I've only been on radio now for a year, but so I listen to other shows and I pick things up. But whenever I listen to your show, I find I learn a lot more. And that's one of the reasons I really strongly recommend that anybody who listens to my show should start listening to yours if they haven't discovered it. It's on Fridays at the same time as mine, right? Studio B, 10 o'clock, goes till midnight. It's truly a remarkable show. I mean, I want to get to him later, but you had Dr. Dan Winter on in his fractal theory of everything, I call it. That was an amazing interview, that one alone. So, but I don't want to go there yet because I got a few other topics I want to hit on. But that was definitely one that you want to pull out of the archive, folks. If you can get that one, that was about 3 weeks ago, I think, when you interviewed him. Now, but I want to get back to your your interesting sort of learning career. And how did you meet Linus Pauling?
Well, it goes back to what happened to me in 1987. Again, I was, and I still am. I've been told a real workaholic. I really very seldom watch television. I call it tell-lie vision because there's just, I mean, especially the network news is just absolutely corrupted. There's no doubt in my mind. I can tell you story after story about how I exposed that situation, but that's another topic. So, in 1987, I was very busy in a new business. I did financial planning for many years. I actually had some pretty, shall we say, prestigious, wealthy clients in Las Vegas area who gave me some interesting documents. And if you want to, I can talk to you about that because it's people that hear this story, their jaw drops. Okay,
Sure. That sounds
amazing story. But in 1987. I literally in my business I just the floor came up and whacked me up the head. I don't remember anything except waking up in the ambulance with paddles being shocked. My heart had stopped. I had what's called hypokalemia event. They diagnosed me with absolutely no potassium in my body, which caused an electrolyte that keeps the heart regulated. So I came to find out that one of my when I was a young man, one of my sports idols is Pistol Pete Maravich, who came from the New Orleans Jazz to the Utah Jazz. I was able to meet him and play. I'm a basketball player myself, though not the level of Pistol Pete by any means. But I can dunk. I used to dunk the ball. Pretty.
Well, you're a tall guy too.
I'm 6'7". When I was in my playing shape, I could get up and down the court, and I could touch my elbows on the rim, but I had no skills like Pistol Pete. Anyway, Pistol Pete died of the same thing. He actually, in a pickup game, he just killed over dead of low blood potassium. He had a hypokalemia event, and other athletes have as well. It's kind of common when you hear of people just basketball players or track people or what have you, football players. Sometimes they just keel over, boom, and you really do the analysis of blood chemistry. Their electrolytes are really out of balance, and so here I am trying to figure out. I was when you're near death, literally near death experience like that, it sobers you up pretty quick. It did me. I was married with a young family, and it was way too soon for me to pass on. And you only get one chance. Once you die, you're dead. I mean, you only do it once. You're only born once, right? So I had to, they try to get my electrolyte potassium balanced, and try as the good doctors might. They gave me pill after different type of pill, but it wasn't absorbable. I was chronically ill for over 18 months, Brian. I was bedridden, okay? And I basically didn't want to live like this anymore. I had too much to do and too many things to accomplish. So I began to search out why I couldn't absorb minerals. This search led me to a doctor named Dennis Remington, who in turn referred, I met a gentleman in Washington, D.C. on the phone who was also a colleague, knew personally Dr. Linus Pauling, and introduced me because that was Pauling's last 20 years of his life was doing mineral research. And what a gracious, incredibly generous man to speak to on the phone. He was always giving of his time. I never met him personally either. He passed on, I believe, in the early 90s, 92 or 93. But it was really, he said, I never forget, he said, if I was a young man again with my life to do over again, I would surely find, do minerals in this form, in this process. And he was completely my mentor on this, very gracious teacher. And so I do promote the Linus Pauling Institute, the good folks now at Oregon State University. There in Corvallis, Oregon, because you see his legacy is going on, their research is going on there, and in fact they do offer a wonderful, in fact I think it's pretty much the same curriculum that I took back in the early 90s, PhD in nutrition there at the Linus Pauling Institute, accredited by Oregon State University. So yeah, it's all good stuff, but see it's outside the box of thinking. All right, I had to step outside the traditional box of thinking back in 1987 to 1990. I had to because, you see, my life was at stake for that. My paradigm of reality changed drastically. And as I got my health back through mineral supplementation in the correct way, where they go directly into the bloodstream and don't have to go through the gastrointestinal tract, and learning about what water does and the importance of water as energy at the cellular level. I got my health back, and I began to really study other areas that were overlooked by what I call the mainstream or lamestream media. Okay, so that's where it all began.
Now, did you? I heard you talk once about a near-death experience. Did that occur at the same time when you almost died?
And actually, I had two during that time. One, as I remember, like I said, I came to in the back of the ambulance, but I had a clear distinction of floating around my place of business outside my body, looking down like, what is this? I remember that very well. And another time, I actually went into cardiac arrest, full-blown anaphylactic condition, and was pronounced dead at the hospital. And at that point, I did go on the other side. I did. I remember it very clearly. There is, to me, after this experience, I got to tell the listeners and you, Brian, I have really no fear of death because I really truly welcome. If I can go back to where I was at that point, I was happy to stay there.
I bet.
I was. It was like, wow, this is cool. This is a neat place.
Can you fill in, describe it a bit for us?
Well, everything seems, the biggest remembrance I have is the vivid colors. It's like, it's like being blind and seeing suddenly. Yeah, we see with our physical eyes, but when you go into this other dimension, as I call it, things are so much more vibrant. It's just like everything's moving and flowing liquid color. And also what was so clear to me was that everything has, shall we say, frequency of sound, almost like living music. It's hard to put into words. It's like trying to describe a sunset to a blind man. It's hard to describe what you saw and how beautiful it and how really it just you were one with that existence, if that makes sense. Everything was flowing, moving with the most incredibly beautiful harmonic sounds of, shall we say, just music that I've never experienced here on Earth. I remember that very clearly, and of course, there I did.
Any beings in the experience? Did you run into your beings?
I didn't see any ancestors or anything like that, anybody that passed on before. I didn't have anything like that, but I did meet an individual that I can't say if he was God or who or what, but there was an absolute acceptance of peace and love with this individual. I got to tell you that. It was like you were coming home after being away for a while, and you felt accepted in every way. And there was no speaking. It was not a verbal communication. It was just, he would communicate. It was like telepathically. You knew what he was saying and directing. And basically the conversation went like this. He said, you need to do a work and change. You have a different mission to perform than what you're doing now. And he was always in not the first person. It was multiple. We need you to change, your thought process and do this other work that we want to direct you with if you're willing. But it's always, here's the key, it was always my choice. I could stay if I wanted to stay. They wanted, whoever they were, wanted me to go back and do a work. And it was always my choice, stay or go, this type of thing. I remember that very vividly. So
and the advice they offered, was it to get into studying nutrition and things of that sort?
I came back and was thinking about because you're always questioning it. That, at least I was that real or was it a dream? Was it just my imagination? Did that really happen? Because when you're back in this flesh and bone body, it's like, was that real? And you're always, at least I was questioning if it was. But I got to tell you, after that experience, I had very vivid dreams of the same place. There were dreams. I would go to sleep, I would have a dream experience, wake up, and I realized, no, there's still connection, and they connect through dreams. At least they do with me.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, that's I think that's one of the reasons we do dream, is to maintain a connection to the spiritual part of the universe. I mean, we're here we're here to learn in this realm, but there's certain lessons you can't learn up there. You have to learn here, and I think that's one of the reasons we come here, is to learn certain lessons that you just can't learn there, and to deal with challenges, because everything's perfect at the higher levels.
Yeah, what I got is that there is control to a certain point. Let me say what I mean by that. Free will and free agency of the individual is critically important to the plan. Okay, and there was always, for instance, I had another dream one time. I said, what if I don't want to do this? What if I don't want to go there? I still want to keep living my life and keep doing it. And this was in a dream state again, and the answer that the messenger had with me in my dream state was, well, do you think you're our first choice? And that was sobering to me. Get off of yourself. Get off your ego. You don't need to do this. There's other people in the background. You have other guests in line to fill in if I'm not available. It's covered. But do I want to help? Yes, I do want to help. See, so it's always a matter of choice, and the plan is set, and there's other alternatives that are backed up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I've received similar messages. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so what should we get on to next? I know that you've done a lot of research on something called Nagalese and GcMAF.
I have.
Find that very interesting, and it's sort of an offshoot of the your mineral research. This is something a cancer treatment or prevention too.
Well, it is. You mentioned GcMAF. That's it's a glycoprotein structure. Glyco meaning sugar-based protein. Okay. MAF stands for macrophage activating factor. So what is a macrophage? Well, very simply, macro means very, very large, and phage is basically to eat or to gobble up, okay? So macro is a very large cell that gobbles up other things. What does gobble up? Well, it gobbles up cancer cells, primarily, and viruses and bacteria and harmful. It's basically the M1 Abrams tank on the front line of defense of your immune system. Okay, so whenever and here's the key. Here's the key. Everybody listening to this show today, I don't care if you're 5 years old or 50 years old or 100 years old. Everybody has some cancer cells in their body. You've got the average adult has around 100 trillion cells operating in their body. The statistics show that some of those cells are going to go rogue. They just do. There's a breakdown in the DNA structures. There's miscommunication. Things do break down, and cancer forms. You have cancer, folks. I have cancer. Brian, you got cancer, my friend. The thing is, if your macrophages are acting, it's not going to overcome and become a deadly problem, you see. But cancer is amazing because...
Yeah, it's like everybody has viruses and bacteria and alien... I mean, what, is it a million a day, or is it a million a minute? I forget what the statistic is, and how many times are antibodies kicking to deal with antigens.
When you study in the field of nutrition and cellular biology, I'm telling you, it's just I have never ceased to be amazed at the intricacies of our cells and how they interact in our immune system. It's just wow. And I do have microscopes in my lab to show these things work, and I'm just amazed to have. And again, anybody that actually believes this incredible machine, this microstructure of, look at the macrophage, just one thing, but the cellular, the mitochondria, the creation of energy through adenosine triphosphate, ATP, all this whole system, there is no way this happened just by accident. There's no way this happened. It's like, who can ever believe you go in, that an Apple computer evolved from a Casio calculator, over time? It's absolutely ridiculous premise. It flat out is. There is no way that one-celled amoeba, pond scum, basically evolved into this intricate mechanism. It's ridiculous. It's designed. It's absolutely a design and creation. And that's my message. And when I talk about that on my show, I get people come and say, you're going religious on me. We don't want to hear that gobbledygook. But hey, it's just fact. It's reality. You go into the cellular structures under a powerful microscope. You can't help but be amazed, at least if you have half a brain working. Okay. So I don't mind saying what I have observed and what I see, and how it works. So the macrophage system, a cancer cell will put out its own line of defense because it's like an invading host. So it puts out another glycoprotein structure that's called nagalase. Nagalase has got one purpose only, and that's to put the macrophage to sleep, to make the tank commander, give him some opium and have him just go on a trip. It malfunctions. The macrophages aren't working. Cancer can become life-threatening. That's the simple premise of the research of this Dr. Yamamoto in Japan. In my opinion, another Linus Pauling brilliant researcher. Yet, in the journals, the record is absolutely, there's no doubt about it. It's been covered up. There's no doubt in my mind about it. Dr. Gonzalez, for one, and other doctors that have dared to bring his macrophage activating factor into play in America have been threatened, and in the case of Dr. Gonzalez, actually killed. Their murders. Can his family prove that? No, they can't. It was made to look like an accident, but the circumstantial evidence is very strong. He was indeed taken out over this.
Yeah, you mentioned that on one of your shows, I think, and I'm not sure. Maybe you've written about that as well. Or did you know him well, Gonzalez, Dr. Gonzalez?
I actually, I remember interviewing him one time just shortly after his successful work with Suzanne Summers. Suzanne Summers, if you grew up in the 70s, was that, airhead blonde character on Three's Company with John Ritter, remember? You don't hear much about Suzanne Summers anymore, but she was still fairly popular and well known in Hollywood circles when she was diagnosed with quite an aggressive breast cancer. She opted to go completely natural, and Dr. Gonzalez was her primary care physician, and it was very successful. Obviously, that's bad publicity, to the cancer doctors, that want to cut, paste, and radiate. So,
a $1 trillion industry that wants us all to be sick. Yes,
that's it. And there's such a strong body of evidence, Brian, that through vaccines, whether it's an influenza vaccine or whether it's a DPT booster or a measles shot, there is no doubt in my mind that there are indeed cancer precursors in every vaccine that are designed to develop cancer in certain segments of the population. It's like George Burns, said, he smokes cigars all of his life. He didn't get lung cancer. Certain people are not going to be as predisposed to cancer in these cancer seeds than other people are. It's a genetic thing. So it's like a farmer sowing seeds in a field, okay? Not all the seeds are going to germinate into a plant that's going to bear fruit, but enough of them are. It's a deadly harvest, okay?
Yeah, and maybe some people have a certain resistance to this Nagalase or Nagalese. That's Nagalese. Is that how you spell it?
Yeah, Naga, Nagalese.
Nagalese.
Nagalese. There's a Dr. Smith has done a great job in putting out it's called the GcMAF book. If you just Google that in any search engine, okay, GcMAF book, you can see it. It's absolutely free of charge, and it's a great primer to help you understand this. I don't know how many cancer patients call up my company and ask what I would do. I said, first thing I would do is read Dr. Smith's book and then learn how to, if at all possible, negate the Nagalese and activate your macrophage. There's other ways to do it. I found that besides just GcMAF, that's a great way to do it. But there are probiotics, other substances that have been clinically shown to activate macrophage too. Not probably as powerfully as what Yamamoto showed and isolated in his GcMAF product. And see, that's the other thing, is where do you get the GcMAF product?
That was my next question. Where do you get this stuff? It sounds awesome.
Well, Dr. Gonzalez, I understand. I haven't been able to totally corroborate this report, but evidently he invested a lot of time or a lot of money to bring product over and stockpile it here because he was so convinced that the research was valid and the results he was seeing was incredible. And thirdly, the opposition with the cancer industry was unprecedented. So that has to tell you that it's got to be effective, right? So I understand that a large amount of the product was actually confiscated and labeled to be, experimental, restricted drug that was not FDA approved, basically, confiscated and destroyed. And so today, how do you get it? Well, I've tried to get a line on it. It's what the source seems to, gone kind of underground, almost in the, I can't tell you where to get it. That's the problem.
Oh, that's frustrating.
It is frustrating. I don't know whether the practitioners that know have taken what happened to Gonzalez and others to Hardin just kind of gone underground with it. Probably that's my guess is what's happened. And it's just, who's the loser? The people with cancer are the losers. The common folk, the people that need the help are the losers. And golly, on a on a grassroots level, that is simply, to me, unacceptable. But see, people don't know. How can they protest? See? This is why we need this alternative media, at least in some way, to start telling the story.
Right. So I thought it might be available in perhaps Mexico. They have a lot of alternative treatment centers down there. Things that you can't get in the U.S. are available there. But it's not even available in Mexico.
I don't know if it is. My suspicion is to be careful, because what is happening in America is people are claiming to have this GcMAF, and it's absolutely bogus. They're just out to be shysters. That has happened on a number of occasions. So I don't. It's almost it's almost better not to get your hopes up and be dashed by a shyster. So wow, is it by design? I think so.
Yeah. So what do you offer? I think you offer advice too to people on cancer treatment, or is that illegal for you to do that?
Well, I'm free to tell people, look, this is what I would do if I had that type of cancer, okay? Because it's just sharing research and possible things for them to research on their own. It's illegal for anybody that's not a licensed medical doctor to, first of all, diagnose. I never diagnose. That's not my job. And I'm not a licensed medical doctor. Okay, I'm just a research PhD. And then you cannot prescribe treatment, which is a very kind of a gray area. You can offer advice and counseling and emotional support. That's currently not illegal. And you just can't claim to have medical treatment going on, and we never do that. And in the radio shows that I do, I make that distinction very clearly. This is a research line, whether it's GcMAF story or vitamin B17 story, which is equally fascinating to me as well. That whole the story of the B17 nutrient and how it does with cancer is valid. I know a lot of people that have received great help with large doses of vitamin B17. And that is one thing you can get legitimately in Mexico and places like Germany. Yeah, if you know where to look. The common name for it is Laetril. Okay, Laetril is a banned drug in America. Yet, if you objectively look at the history of Laetril, you find that my goodness, it has a lot of what I deem to be real strong credibility. There's cancer clinics like Dr. Richardson's cancer clinic in California was very successfully treating cancer patients with primarily Laetril and diet, which is called B17 vitamin structures, and doing so very, very effectively until they were raided by the Gestapo and shut down. It was tragic what happened in Dr. Richardson's clinic. Okay? Not hurting anybody, but very much helping a lot of people.
No, I didn't hear that story. When did that happen?
Oh golly, that's been back in, I believe, in the 90s, late 90s. There's a G. Edward Griffin. You probably know of him. He's done a lot of research and books. He had his own radio show for a while. He wrote the expose on the creature from Jekyll Island. Okay, Mr. Griffin's wife was a nurse for Dr. Richardson in the Richardson Cancer Clinic. Actually, I've covered that story many years ago during when I had my live radio show. It's absolutely tragic what Dr. Richardson went through. Absolutely unconscionable.
Did they was there legal action involved? There's another chap, his name escapes me now, but he's come up with an alternative treatment, and they've taken him up in front of the medical board like 4 or 5 times, and he's won every time. But it taxes you when you have to put that much energy into fighting for your treatment.
Dr. Richardson his clinic was actually shut down. He was, as I remember correctly, he was actually brought up under criminal charges. He was an elderly doctor at the time, and it just it just crushed him and the whole staff. See, yeah, and they use scare tactics. I say the Gestapo, the FDA goons that did this. They, Laetrile, vitamin B17 is best. You can. It's very rich in apricot kernels. Okay, but there is toxicity with that. There is surely, because it has to kill cancer cells. But here's the key thing: the benzaldehyde and arsenic structures are only because of the way it's structured. This is what Dr. Krebs found in his research in the original patent for Laetrile. Yes, it kills cells on a toxic level, but only cancer cells that are lacking specific enzyme structures. So are these toxins poisonous to cells? Yes, but the cancer cells here. But here's the hypocrisy. What do you think chemotherapy is? See, traditional chemotherapy is designed to kill all cells. Healthy cells, they're designed to weaken the immune system, so the immune system is not too active, because if it is too active, all cells will die. Okay? There's incredible hypocrisy there.
Oh, definitely.
The difference is, the traditional chemotherapy drugs are, there's a lot of money to be made with that. That's the bottom line.
Now, Linus Pauling also was promoting the use of intravenous injections of vitamin C with cancer treatment.
He was. Yeah. In fact, he brought his two Nobel Prizes that he was awarded was in the field of research on ascorbic acid vitamin C structures. And one of the things, we owe the prevalence of vitamin C to Dr. Pauling. That was really what he brought to the world. In his latter years, his last 2 decades, he was studying the role of minerals. And he said it best, summed it up. He says, you can actually trace every disease state, every condition, ultimately to a mineral deficiency. He told me that many times. And that's a shocking statement. Is it really that simple? I asked him that many times. He says, yes, here's why. Because you see, the minerals, he explained, were what he called coenzyme factors. In other words, the body needs the base minerals to produce and lock in place enzymes. Now, enzymes, in turn, are the building blocks of all of the hormone structures in the endocrine system, the amino acid chains, everything that we have to balance our 7 endocrine glands in our body. They've got to have minerals to start the process rolling. It's like, imagine an intense chemical assembly line, in a factory, okay? You need 5 or 6 different basic ingredients to produce an end chemical. Well, if you're missing 1 or 2 of the primary elements of that, which in this case are minerals, the assembly line malfunctions. If the assembly line malfunctions, you got a disease state, whether it's heart disease, whether it's diabetes, the pancreas shutting down. His research showed that it's tied to specific mineral elements. And really, it makes sense, as he told me a couple of times. He says, really, look at what happens when all is said and done. The human body, the exoskeleton, the skeleton itself, the cartilage, the makeup of the skin, we're really just a handful of minerals and water. Really, that's all we are. But he put the value like $3.80 worth of minerals and water. That's all we are. That's absolutely correct.
Well, yeah, I like Paul Stamets' analogy. We're actually like a walking, talking microbial community. Like most of the cells in our body are actually microbial, and they're a big part of the digestive system and things of that sort. And our the water in our body is slightly saline, like the oceans. So it really isn't in our bone structure is similar to that of coral reef. So yeah, there's a lot of signs to me that there's a lot of the Creator like to sort of situate us in our own, like I call, body biosphere. What do you think of that theory?
Oh, indeed, it's a microcosm of an ocean. It's also cool to see if you look at the structure of sevens. I've done presentations in symposiums on the significance of the count of seven, whether it's your DNA strand hydrogen connecting bonds, whether it's your number of your endocrine glands, the 28 days, 7 times 4 numbers of the menstrual cycle in the fair sex, our women. All these things are very much tied. The menstrual. The word menstrual the root is the moon. It follows the moon cycles of 28 days. Okay, the lunar structures we are tied in a cosmic sense in so many our cells, our bodily functions to the movements of the universe. There's no doubt about that either. Okay, so the inner cell, if you look at it deeply enough, it's really a reflection on a micro scale of the universe in a macro scale. It's amazing to see the connections. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, and that sort of gets us to the interview you had with Dan Winter about this fractal theory of everything just based upon a certain fractal equation. He said it's just repeating over and over again. Do you see that connection to what you're saying, or do you think it's a different point?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, the fractals are all part of it, and it all ultimately comes into numbers, doesn't it? See, this incredible Mandelbrot set, as it's called. There's oh my goodness, as you see that pattern repeating, the numbers of creation in the structure called PHI phi, the so-called golden ratio. These things are so very, very obvious at the cellular level and the macro level in the universe. So, yeah, I like to call him Dr. Winters, but yeah, he's genius on that. He's got it right.
Well, I've listened to that interview and I've made notes on it. I haven't actually quite got through it all, and I'm sort of studying what he was saying, and I don't know. I just go with my gut on these things, and not being an expert in this area, but I do know a fair bit about common sense things about how to stay healthy. I've been pretty successful with it most of my life, so I go with my gut. And the first book I read about good nutrition was Be Your Own Doctor. Ann Wigmore wrote this book, and it was all about mainly a raw diet, recommending a raw diet and things of that sort. So it's done me well, all I can say.
Absolutely, just common sense. Common sense. Water's critically important, as you mentioned in the first part of the show. What it means to have negatively charged water. It sounds like it's negative is bad. No, negative simply means there's extra electrons that the water can carry. Okay, electricity, for instance, rain is a classic example. Rain that's charged by electrical impulses we call lightning. A lightning's charges the water falling from cloudbursts with negatively charged particles. And isn't it amazing how fast the grass grows or the weeds spring up after a thunderstorm? It's amazing to see that because it's giving life to the cellular level. That's what we're talking about here is water that is has a charge that has electrons that are free, because electrons that are given to the cell are life-giving, okay? And even the oxygen we breathe. People don't realize when you talk about oxygen, the oxygen we breathe in is O2, right? When you have electrical lightning storms, the air becomes charged as O3 or ozone. Okay, the mainstream media says ozone's harmful to you. Don't breathe it in. Ozone in the form of congestive smog is different than clean ozone created by Mother Nature and lightning storms. Okay, the oxygen you breathe. Here's a really key thing to understand. If you sit a long time in front of a television screen or a computer screen, these electrical devices are actually discharging electrons from the O2 oxygen you breathe. It becomes positively charged and extremely harmful. We're going to take a break, don't we? I'll shut up.
Yes, we are going to go on break here, folks. Welcome back to I'm Nature. I'm your host, Brian Porter, and I have Dr. Ott with me this year, radio host of The Story Behind the Story. His show is on Fridays at 10 p.m. Eastern, Studio B. Before I get back to Dr. Ott, I have a few things I'd like to mention. The most important one being the fact that Revolution Radio is a listener-sponsored platform. We very much appreciate your support that you've offered. I guess we're almost up and running now for 5 years, and we've managed to garner a huge audience worldwide, not just in the U.S., and we really appreciate all your support that you've offered, and I encourage everyone at least, to make an offering of $5 a month. I think the archives is your best resource here at the station. Often you can't listen to a show, busy lives get in the way or whatever. But you can always download it at your convenience and listen to it in your car, on your radio, at home. So I think the archives are a real gem with 92 hosts. I think there's always something there that you're going to want to listen to. And I just definitely recommend that you download Dr. Ott's shows. They're really tremendous. The other thing is the issue of my extended program now. It's started last week. I thought it was a good start. I'm going 2 hours extra now. It's called I Am Nature Extended. It starts at midnight Eastern, 9 out West. I encourage people to contact me on Skype, bporter5611. I got a phone number. Someone called in. It's a little early if you want to call back, 310, area code 310, at the top of the hour of this hour. I certainly accept your call at that point, but I prefer if you Skype into me at bporter5611, and then we'll get you on the program. Alrighty, let's get back to Dr. True Ott, who's just an amazingly well-informed person, and not only does he know a ton about nutrition and cancer treatment, but he's really on top of all the latest political scandals. I don't know, how do you keep track of all this stuff, Dr. Ott?
Well, it's what's the it basically all circumscribes into one great whole. It's all, once you figure out who the players are, it's pretty easy to keep track of, because they use the same scripts over and over again. I mean, this is what I learned from Bill Cooper, and let me just again plug him. He's no longer with us, but his book lives on. The book that you can get free online is simply Behold a Pale Horse. My goodness, you want to connect some dots, really study that book, because it's really timeless. His whistleblowing as a dissatisfied Navy intelligence officer that figured that there was things that the American people need to know whether they like it or not. Again, that's an incredible read. Everything from really the story behind the UFO, misinformation, disinformation, to the story of Jonathan May. That's an incredibly untold story. What Jonathan May was all about. I actually interviewed him in my radio career. What a story! Absolutely verifiable, and was the real reason behind the Oklahoma City bombing. The Edward P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City was a repository for for Jonathan May's Sodalitas Trust documents from the United Kingdom. And they went up in a puff of smoke with the bombing. Again, that's the real story behind the story of the Oklahoma City bombing. Incredible
Let's
story.
just get back to that resource you offered. I think that's something that maybe people might want to look at. It sounds very interesting. I actually haven't read this book. So it's called Behold the Pale Horse?
Behold a Pale Horse, I believe.
A Pale Horse, okay.
Yeah.
And it's by Bill Cooper.
Bill Cooper, and at least a year or so ago, it was online, free to download. It's an incredible read if you really want to call yourself a truther and find out and make your own opinions. I would especially recommend that part of the what's called the Sodalitas Trust and Jonathan May. Let me just tell you, those of you who might want to know just the background of it. There's this Jonathan May was, I'm not sure if he's still with us now or not, a British citizen of the United Kingdom, right? He was going through family documents and found a deed of trust, for heaven's sakes, that was given to his family, the May family, from it was basically deeding to the family for services rendered a large tract of land in the colonies of America. It was basically much of what the Louisiana Purchase was purchased from France, if you know your American history. Much of modern-day Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas, that block of land, much of it, which is so extremely rich in oil, natural, and other natural resources, correct? Well, he went and through the legal system in Great Britain, he verified the legality and the veracity of his claim. In other words, France had no real legal right to sell that land because they had no clear international title for it. So you see here's the situation. Jonathan May said, well, I'm going to exert my right to own and to basically control this land that's now part of the federal government's, it was a tremendous monkey wrench in the system. So the concept that he had was if he would be able to be granted the ownership, which he appeared to have the right to, rather than utilize it for his own personal wealth, what he decided to do was set up an alternative monetary system to challenge the Federal Reserve. Okay? So it was the only real credible threat.
What date are we talking about? What's the time frame here?
This would be I believe in the 70s. Yeah, 70s and 80s. So as you come to the time where all this was finally going to be heard in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, the original documentation had to be brought in to be examined as part of this ongoing trial in the courts. Well, as this explains in the book, the trust documents arrive, it's set to go, and kaboom, it's all destroyed. Wow. And so there's the claim gone of Jonathan May, and a real potentially credible threat to the Federal Reserve and the banksters. That really it's a scam. It is ultimately nothing but a scam. The emperor has no clothes, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, you really you have it. I think you have most of the issues figured out based upon what I've heard on your show. I mean, you're certainly on top of the Fed, the banksters. One of the things that you get into quite deeply is the history of the Roman Catholic Church in the Vatican. I think that's an area that is not as well known in the truther movement. And a guy named Simon Magus. Maybe you should, if you feel open or comfortable doing it, offer a summary of that famous character.
Well, yeah, that's that's very controversial there, Brian. And of course, I can't tell you all the hate mail I've gotten from some good Catholic listeners, and I did a couple of shows exposing the Pope when he was visiting here. Come on, let's be real. This guy is a Jesuit, and what is a Jesuit but a secret society that has absolutely not the best interests of the world at heart? I mean, look at the Jesuit oaths they have to take of secrecy. I like what JFK said. There's no room for secrecy in a republic, in a free and open society, and he was going to wrap that out. Who was he talking about? Well, he was talking about people like the Jesuits and secret societies like P2 Freemasonry. Albert Pike, we talked about that on a couple of shows. The founder of this secret society of Masonry, Freemasonry. Again, it's compartmentalized to the point where the average Joe Blow, Joe Smith Mason, right, really thinks he's just part of a really good boys, men's club that does good in the community. That's as far as it goes, and they scoff at the idea that there's something very sinister and menacing at the very top levels. But make no mistake, there is. Okay. And we're talking really about why have secrecy, you see, if there's not nefarious planning going on? Because if you're really helping humanity, you want people to know everything about it. That's what JFK was referring to in his famous speech exposing secret societies. Okay? Secret conspiracies.
He made that speech, a few months before he was taken out?
Absolutely. I believe it was there at Columbia University. And he was exactly right on. And yet, what religion was JFK a part of? Roman Catholicism. He basically saw through it, I submit. Okay? And he had a change of heart. The biblical word repentance is in the Greek is the Greek word metanoia. Metanoia is not about going to a priest and confessing an evil sin. That's not what repentance is all about at all. Metanoia simply means a change of mind. You change your mind about things because of experiences that you've seen. So I submit John Fitzgerald Kennedy had a metanoia moment. He changed his mind about a lot of things, and he manned up, in my opinion. I think he was the last honest president we've ever had in this country. Personally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Canadian, but wow, it was a shock up here when all that happened here as well. Everyone loved President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. He was. I think, I agree. I mean, he introduced a different currency. He got rid of his own currency based upon, I think it was a gold-backed currency, was it not? As well.
Well, no, he ordered the Treasury to start printing U.S. Treasury notes for the first time, and it's the last president to actually order that done was, interestingly enough, was Abraham Lincoln. He began, he realized, in the latter part of his presidency, before he was assassinated, and he said it best. He says the most creative work that Congress or a president can do is to basically free up currency and make it so that it's not interest bearing. See, this is the big scam. There's no need for a privately held corporation to regulate money and to get paid an interest rate on top of that to do it. What do you think we have the Treasury for? See, JFK understood that, so did Abraham Lincoln. So they both paid the ultimate penalty for it. You don't mess with the main money-making machine. You just don't. Yeah. I referenced this just briefly in the first hour, Brian. One of my financial planning clients in Las Vegas, after we did his, he had extensive real estate holdings and he needed to basically liquidate him without a major tax event, right? So we set up a trust structure with him to do so. Where his property is now is Steve Wynn's Mirage Hotel, and that's built on that property. So that's my history going back in the 80s with that section of Las Vegas. What was strange is after we finished his estate plan and set up the trust, he had to change his will, and so I took a fiduciary role now, along with his attorney and his accountant, his CPA. One of the things that he made very clear is he had a list, which I thought at the time was a little bit borderline paranoia, somewhat. I didn't understand his rationale behind it, but he had a list of 8 or 9 ways if he died of these ways, such as a sudden heart attack, high-speed accident on a freeway, these type of things, accidental gunshot wound type of thing, that he specifically requested a file be sent to a law firm in Wilshire Boulevard in California. That was his will and testament to me, and I was entrusted with a copy of that specific file, which was sealed in a manila envelope, large manila envelope, and wrapped with a lot of cellophane tape, okay? So I honored that. I took possession of that and put it in my safe. I had a safe deposit box at the time with important papers. That was where it was kept. And it resided there until, for golly, from the late 80s until roughly the latter part of the 90s, the mid-90s, 96, 97, okay? When I was going through my papers, saw that, I said, well, I better find out what's going on with this ex-client of mine. So I called the home phone number, talked to this gentleman's wife, and was informed that he had a stroke. He's in a nursing home, still alive, but pretty much incapacitated. And she would have to talk to him about the file and see what he wanted done with it. So she did call me back in about 2 days later, as I remember, and she said, he just says it's not relevant. You can discard or throw away the file, this package, if you would like. And so I did. I had a different business at the time, so I remember throwing it into a dumpster. And as I was cleaning and emptying the trash that night, I said, well, just for curiosity, what the heck is this? So I opened the envelope and began to read it, and I was just flat out shocked by what I was reading. I had no idea, but it was something called a gemstone file. The gemstone file was all about the assassination of JFK, who did it, and really why. You talk about a paradigm shift. At this time, I was 1,000% Republican GOP, conservative Republican. I was so stunned when Bill Clinton took the election from George Herbert Walker Bush. I was devastated that this bozo liberal could do what he did, and I was of that mindset. I don't mind telling you.
Were you Mormon there too?
I was, absolutely. Active, 110% Mormon. The contents of that file absolutely blew my paradigm of reality to smithereens. Because, you see, it implicated a company called Zapata Inc. offshore and George Herbert Walker Bush, Dallas, Texas, CIA director, CIA chief. And after that, he indeed was elevated to the top job in the CIA. I'm reading this and I'm saying, holy cow, this can't be real. But why would this? There was evidence. There was canceled checks, bank accounts. I mean, the whole 9 yards. To me, it looked pretty doggone convincing. But the next question I had is, what the heck do I do with this? What does this law firm in Wilshire Boulevard have to do with this information? Why would it matter where it went? I just was like stunned with it. I thought, well, this should go in the trash. Forget about it. And I was pulled apart. Half of me wanted to throw it away and forget about it. The other half said, no, wait a minute. This is historically valid. This stuff needs to be investigated. That's the investigative truther, in me to find out, to see if this is legitimate. My gut was it wasn't. My inside, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that it could be, the Bush family could be this absolutely sordidly corrupt. Couldn't possibly be, see. So what happened was I just put the file away, and I says, what can I do? I can't give it to the FBI. They're going to, because they're implicated in it too. With what Hoover did to stop the investigation. The Warren Commission, all this was all set in stone to keep a cover-up. So I'm sitting there, wow, and I'd watched the JFK movie by Oliver Stone, and with the information in the file, suddenly I realized that movie wasn't quite accurate either. They didn't have the full picture. So I needed to find out, well, if it's real or not. So I let it sit for about a year and a half, 2 years. It was nagging me, and it was like a splinter in my brain, right? Saying, this is, should I dump it? Should I destroy it? Should I just ignore it? What should I do? Well, I formed an active grassroots opposition to the world's largest hog factory farm operation called Circle 4 Farms, okay? And what they were doing as far as big agribusiness coming in and just absolutely running roughshod over small independent ranchers and farmers was absolutely wrong. So I mobilized grassroots effort to kind of protest and keep them accountable. Well, I received quite a bit of publicity at the time there was articles in the Wall Street Journal. We had U.S. News and World Report did a little report on our group. Other publications in North Carolina were constantly, calling me up for interviews, this type of thing. And one day I received a phone call from the editor of a magazine called George Magazine. George Magazine, I had no idea about it. I didn't know what it was all about, but I said, surely I would love to tell my story to anybody. They said they would like to do a series of photo shoot interviews from aerial photography to the whole story, and would likely be a cover story for one of their upcoming month's magazines. Well, okay, nice honor. They flew out. The editor of George Magazine came in. They were true to their word. We spent the entire Saturday doing photo shoots on the ground and in the air, and a series of interviews with not only myself but other people negatively affected by this story. You know how it goes. We were closing the day with a dinner at the nicest steakhouse in the area, and I sat down. I had to admit, I said, please excuse my ignorance, but I have no idea what George Magazine is all about. I've never heard of it before. And so he pulled out a couple of copies, a couple editions, and first thing I looked at in the front page was who the owner was. The founder and owner of the papers, John Jr. So I said, wow, do you personally know John Kennedy Jr.? He says, oh yeah, we're very close friends. We grew up together, yada, yada, yada. I said, wow, that's cool. Tell me, America's image of little John is, little brave lad coming as his father's funeral caisson rolls by. He salutes with the flag, right? He does a salute. That's America's image of John, right? I said, given what happened to his father, does he subscribe to the Warren Commission report? Does he accept it as closed, or what's his status with his father? The response was, of course, he doesn't believe that was accurate, but what can he do? The trail's gone cold. There's not a whole lot that he can do about it at this point, but he definitely knows there was shenanigans, right? My next question was, have you ever heard of something called the gemstone files? We were eating our salad from the salad bar, waiting for our steaks to arrive, and I'll never forget his response was, "What do you know about the gemstone?" I said, "Well, it hit a nerve." He knew about the gemstone. I says, "Well, I might have a copy of it." He says, "Are you essing me? You know, are you fooling me?" I said, "No, I wouldn't do that." "Where'd you get it from?" When I told him where I got it from and the circumstances behind it. See, Las Vegas was built on mob money that was supposed to go into Havana, Cuba. There was, Cuba was supposed to be the gaming mecca, which is now Las Vegas. But see, that was alternative. And this is all part of the story of this file, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I handed the file over to him, made copies to send to another attorney firm that I know as backup, and this fellow said, I'm going to read this and let you know tomorrow morning. I said, fine, it's in the right hands. I don't want anything more to do with it. I'm done. Thank you very much. Well, at 5 o'clock the next morning, this was Sunday morning. Now we had the day Saturday together. He was pounding on my door, waking me up. He says, I've been in contact with John. I'm to fly this directly to him without delay. He's got to have it, and he's authorized me to compensate you for the information. I says, well, that's very kind, but I really don't want money for this. It's not my information. I received it, kind of accidentally, and I just want to pass it on. I don't need any money for it. I refuse to take money. I said, but I do request.
But you also turned down $500,000 from a radio station when you were in the producing these incredible radio shows and were nominated for the Peabody Award because they wanted to control the content of your show, and you showed what integrity you have, and you said, no, I won't limit the scope of my show for any amount of money, and I find that to be incredibly professional and integral of you to have done that.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it was an offer for syndication to take this story behind the story on. It's kind of like what you see in Clear Channel with Rush Limbaugh and Hannity and those type of well, I call them media whores, frankly, because they just won't tell the whole story. I know who controls Clear Channel. It's the Israeli Mossad. There's no doubt about that. They have too much control over the media and the so-called alternative hosts. These conservative hosts are just absolutely doing their job well. They're paid to do just what they're doing. Okay, been there, done that. I know of which I speak on this one. But yeah, I appreciate that. But getting back to the story, so yeah, I'm stunned that this is, I'm actually relieved that this has gone to the right hands. I just asked one thing, that if it turns out to be factual, I need to know. I don't have the resources to check on these files, to check the bank accounts, but I was assured that it would be checked out. And so I said that's what, and again, this was in I believe mid-April. I heard nothing more on the situation until the 4th of July, Saturday, the 4th of July weekend that same year. The phone rang at my house. I took the call. It was John Kennedy Jr. on the other line, explaining what he had uncovered. He said he'd paid well over 6 figures in private investigation team to verify the contents of the file. It was more than accurate. In fact, he said to me that he was they were going to be convening a federal grand jury in Washington on Monday, the following, just 48 hours from now, and they were going to be getting indictments on George Herbert Walker Bush for murder. I mean, this is from his mouth. I'm sitting there listening to this and getting goosebumps and like, oh my heavens. This is the story of the century. This is going to stop the presses worldwide. You see. And I had the conversation with something like this. Do you really think that this will go that far? And he says, absolutely. This evidence is more than enough to issue indictments. And then the indictments, you see, would be tried in a court on a capital crime. I says, listen, you found that the file is accurate. Keep in mind they killed your father, who was the sitting president. How in the world do you think you can do this and be safe? His response was, we're taking every precaution. Now, whatever that means, okay? Mm-hmm. Then I got personal and the conversation got kind of personal because I said, how does this information affect you if I might be so bold to ask? He got emotional with me on the phone. He got choked up because he said, you don't understand the demons that this information has exorcised from my life. And that was cool. I said, that's awesome. He says, the truth indeed can set you free. He said that to me on the phone, and it has set me free. Then the next thing is he wanted my bank account information. He offered to wire me $50,000. I said, look, I told your friend, I'm telling you, John, with all due respect, I don't want your money. I think this is blood money. I don't like this. If you want to donate it to charity. I don't want the money from this. Thank you. And he got choked up on that. He says, I can't believe you would turn down my offer. I says, that's very generous. I says, but really, I'm so glad that justice will be served with this thing. And he said, look, here's my telephone number, my personal line. You call me for anything that you ever need anything. He says, and I'll answer the phone for you. And I said, not like that. I made a friend. Okay, I'll take that offer. Well, the next day he's dead from a plane crash. Okay, the very next day.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So they were obviously listening.
Well, I don't know if they were listening, but after that,
Well, they knew about the investigation that he put together and the facts.
Well, of course they did. Of course they did. It was. They had to stop it. I have a very high level contact in Washington D.C. who was when I told him what went down with what I knew, he was fully aware of what was happening on the Beltway. He was stunned. He says, "You're the one that gave this information to John?" I says, "Absolutely." I says, "Am I in danger here?" He says, "Absolutely, you are." Well, luckily we had copies to certain people that guaranteed my safety, because I have no means to bring this indictment. And we talked philosophy. And here's what he told me. He says, "Look, there is such an entrenched evil in this world. You know, it's call it whatever you want, the Satan, the devil, whatever. It's just flat out evil and wants to control humanity." He says, I'm here to tell you that it's not realistic to wipe it out completely. That's not our job. All we can do is to do battle and hope for small victories and keep a balance. In other words, it's like a chessboard. He told me, he says, you've got to have even number of black squares and even number of white squares. Balance, like détente, is all we can hope to accomplish with our good. He says there's good agents in the CIA. There's some very evil ones too. There's balance, and we're trying to strive for that balance. He says the powers that be tried to talk John out of doing this because of it would upset the balance of power, and he wouldn't be dissuaded. He wanted justice. I said, well, golly, how long does these evil men have to win? How many times do they have to do this? And he says, well, that's all the good points. He says, but keep in mind, it's not balanced. And I says, I don't know if I buy that argument, but I'm just a small little hick guy in a small little town in Utah. I don't know anything about that. I just know that a friend that I just made is now dead. And am I in danger? Yes, I am. And trust me, my phone lines were bugged. Back then we had caller ID on the landlines. Cell phones weren't around, of course. And my caller ID stopped working. I called the local service provider to come out. A technician came out the very day I called, and he wouldn't talk to me about whether the problem was solved or not. I said, what's going on? He says, I can't talk about it. I says, wait a minute, this is my phone line. You can't talk about it? What's the matter with you? I want to know what's wrong with my phone. I kind of bullied him a little bit, on it. And he finally says, well, all I can tell you is got a very high level, very high sophisticated bug on your line. So, verified it. All right. So what was basically struck is, I know we were listening. My attorney structured it, and the file would be sent to a very reputable investigative reporter with the full story of what went down and why, if something ever happened to me. That was my only bargaining chip. Okay, so I've kept reading over this thing, even though, trust me, I was getting phone calls from people claiming to be from major publications such as the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times. All these people calling me for interviews about some kind of file that supposedly I was given to JFK. I says, I have no comment. I don't know where you got your information. I don't know anything about that. I would not. And they even, offered to bribe me with large money for my interview. I'm telling you, this was I was not sure what to do about it. And again, so credibility factors, what's going on. That the file is still somewhere, in a lawyer's box in case something ever happens to me to this day. But it is what it is, and two men were killed. Two American heroes, in my opinion, were taken out because of a crime syndicate run family. Okay? Talk about shattering your paradigm. And yeah, the Mormon Church was implicated in this thing too. Believe me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's one of the real things that caused me to question my Mormon faith. I'm fifth generation. Wow. There was implications in this file because the Mormon Church is very much tied into this syndicate that was operating. And I won't go into any gory details, but the Mormon Church is not what it claims to be either. By far and away not. It's not just some harmless social club, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just a false religion. There's a secret, a hidden agenda with this organization, believe me.
Yeah, you've discussed that a few times on your show. I mean, you used to be were you a prominent member of the Mormon Church, would you say, or were you just a believer in it?
Well, I was, the Mormon Church has what's called lay leadership. There's no paid clergy, right? And so I was fairly high level local leadership. We're talking in the bishopric type of thing, and what's called high priest quorum. I was leadership in that, and taught Mormon doctrine for years and years in Sunday school. So yeah, I was very much a part of the culture. I should say the cult.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're a very intense person. Whatever you do for in a very serious way, and you try to do it right. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that you moved out quickly in the Mormon Church.
Well,
And were you
people.
born into the church? Was it something your parents were into as well?
Oh yeah, I said I say fifth generation. My ancestry goes clear back to early days of Mormonism in Nauvoo, Illinois, on both sides of my family, both my Ott family side and my maternal side, which is Haywood, the Haywood family. My ancestors were actually taught by Joseph Smith himself and were part of his inner circle. That's how deeply back this goes, you see.
Wow, that's incredible. So you really know of what you speak when you talk about the Mormon Church. Then I'm sure it was taught to you from the day you were born.
Yeah, and
Right.
so I began to investigate the church in a way that, once the Bible talks about people's scales falling from their eyes. Scales. We're not talking about folks, weights and measure scales. We're talking about something that's best described as snake scales. Okay, scales of reptiles that blind people. I mean, I had these scales fall off my eyes and saw for what it really was, and I was flat out stunned.
Yeah.
So
Oh no. I mean, you talk about the story behind the story. Sometimes there's 5 or 6 levels of sabotage or indoctrination or disinformation. There's a lot of levels to the matrix now,
yeah,
and it's really becoming more and more sophisticated. And I think every generation they try to add a few. And so it's people like you that are really, I hope people listen to your show because you really do get, I think, to the bottom of most of the issues and clarify things. And I think it really helps to maybe put people in a position where you were, where you believed in the system, and then all of a sudden you realize, hey, as you have this, the machine play at the beginning of your show. Basically, it's a machine with a system without conscience that's running the road right now, or most of it.
yeah, artificial intelligence, the transhumanism agenda, the whole story of NASA, for heaven's sakes, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, all of that information comes from folks. It's a seance that was held, and we'll call them whatever you want. I call them demonic entities. They call them extraterrestrial watchers or whatever you want to call them. They direct the formation of these quasi-governmental agencies, and make no mistake, this is who is directing them right up to this day. You look at NASA, the logo, and you see NASA with a stylized blue T in the center of it. Well, those are 5 letters that make one word called Satan, too. Is that just an accident?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Do you know Dr. James McCanney?
I do not.
Okay. Well, he's I call him the Tesla mind of this era, and he's a good friend of mine. And yeah, he's got some pretty powerful ideas, but he's had to go into hiding as well. I mean, he's done a little bit of work with the military-industrial complex, but he understands the electrical nature of the universe, and he's quite confident he could get all sorts of things to go way out, far beyond the solar system, and he thinks that they actually have done that already using the knowledge that they confiscated from Tesla.
Yeah, and again, my opinion of that, what they call the UFO phenomenon, I have no doubt UFOs exist, ladies and gentlemen. I know they do. In fact, in my research in Area 51, being in southern Utah, we had many stakeouts of Rachel, Nevada, the so-called Dreamland, and I had many shows with whistleblowers on the inside. They're and the most incredible stories. But here's the bottom line: they are not from some outer space group for the most part. There's a few, but the main thing, they're inner space. They come from our own interdimensional space. That's the reality. Okay.
I agree.
So, yeah, we're talking, shall we say, inner Earth. structures as well. Interdimensional, inner earth, that's the lion's share of where it comes from. There, these so-called grays and those type of beings, they're what the Bible calls demonic entities. And make no mistake, that's what's running the show.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk a few times on your show about the different families that have become sort of emissaries of the demons over recently, like the Warburg family, families of this sort. You've actually lined them up with specific demon names.
Yes, that's again, that's what you learn from the pages of Bill Cooper's book, The Pale Horse. You'll see this information outlined there, and I submit it's very accurate from other sources. You see, there's when we started doing the nuclear proliferation, okay, the Cold War was raging, and all this race to blow up the planet, right? There was benevolent inner earth, interdimensional relationship going on, because these higher evolved civilizations made it clear that a nuclear destruction of this planetary structure would affect other dimensions negatively as well. They had a stake in the fight, okay? They had a dog in the fight. And so they actually, and Cooper documents this so well in the book, that they brought technology to bear that would really expand the life expectancy of human beings and basically eradicate cancer for sure. These things were offered if we would just abandon the nuclear path we were on. Well, again, this was during the Truman era, latter part of World War II, after the bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the result, the offer was declined because you say they'd already made treaties with the opposing force. That's the reality. I guarantee you that's factual. Now
what does plutonium mean? The devil's metal? I mean, come on, folks.
Yeah. So it is what it is. There's the positive forces of the universe very much in play here, and I have to believe that the light overcomes the darkness. That's why I do talk about the Bible as being accurate. There's incredible proofs and documentation of this. I spent 2 weeks in Israel this year in February, March, on some very, very, very controversial archaeological digs in that incredible little country. You realize there's only like 5% of the archaeological significant digs that have ever been excavated in that country? Only 5%. And yet there's enough out of that 5% that is literally filled museums to the brim. This is an incredible reservoir of historical evidence, and in every sense of the word, it validates and verifies the biblical accounts. You can't ignore this, folks. The secular world, the unbelieving world of science, wants to say it doesn't exist and to ignore it and to try and put a cap on it. But let me tell you, it's real. You can't ignore the truth. For instance, excavating in the ancient city of Jericho, the whole biblical account that's in the book of Joshua is absolutely validated in every way by the archaeological dig there. It's amazing. And I can go on and on and on and on and on and on. Okay? You can't ignore what the Bible is talking about, because it's a history of what went before, and it's more importantly the truth of what is to come.
Is Putin the king of the North, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a valid argument to be made there, and Obama this king of the South. Yeah, but again, it's not. I personally believe that there's going to be, we're talking about the end of what's called an age coming. The question becomes, when did the age begin? The age in biblical terms is what's called a jubilee of jubilees. It's synonymous with an age, right? A jubilee being 7 times 7 years, or 49 years. So 49 times 49 is the age. Do the math. That's 2,401 years. So the question becomes, when did the age begin that Christ refers to it, that he will return at the end of the age? Now, no man knows the date and time of that event, but there's scholars that seem to think that the age began at the end of the Maccabean, rule of 100 years before Christ. Some thinks it was right at the date of Herod the Great. So but the bottom line is we're anywhere from 2100 AD to 2400 AD is the time frame of an age. That's when it's going to end. Mm-hmm. Interesting little math equations there. So, I have a colleague friend who'll probably be interviewed. I wanted to have him before Christmas, talking about the incredible program based on Johann Kepler's study of the movement of the stars, which has been proven by again modern computer models of the night sky in every hemisphere. You can actually map and see what the night sky has done, the movement of the planets and the stars and the constellations as we go through it. All this is well documented. The program is called Starry Night. It's a really cool computer program. But what's neat about Starry Night is you can go forward, 150 years if you want to see what the night sky constellations will do. Map out what's called the blood moon, the lunar eclipses, those type of things. But what's really cool, you go back in time and see what the night sky looked like in 3 BC. And guess what we find? We find total proof of the so-called Star of Bethlehem happening. It's such a cool program. You see also when Jesus Christ is referred to as the King of Kings, the star that made up the incredible Magi star involved the planet Jupiter and the bright star Regulus, where we get the term regal. In the ancient cultures, the star called planet Jupiter was named because of its kingly nature. The king was Jupiter. Regulus was the king. So it was basically the King of Kings forming this new great star. It's documented in the program, done by secular computers, right? So this is not fiction. This stuff, and the every date as to his crucifixion is, the date that if you do all the biblical homework in the notes, you find it was April 3rd of the year 33 AD. And what happened in 33 AD? It's right in the star charts. There was this incredible blood moon and a full solar eclipse on this exact hour that he was killed. It's all the biblical account is valid based on this new computer program. What's the odds of that happening? But more important, what that tells me, Brian, is, there is a deity called God, okay, and there is a creator,